We've done every country's best World Cup performance, so why not do every country's best Euros performance? As we go, we'll fill in the map with colours representing the furthest round each team has reached, so let's get started with Malta. Back in the early days of the European Championships, only 4 teams qualified for the final tournament, and in 1976, the first round of qualifying consisted of 8 groups of 4 teams, with first place going through to a playoff match. Malta's one win in that round left them 7 points behind Germany, probably the closest they've come to qualifying. Iceland are the least populated nation to ever qualify for both the Euros and the World Cup, qualifying for the former in 2016. A whopping 8% of the country's population travelled to France for the tournament, where finishing second in their group of Hungary, Portugal and Austria put them through to the round of 16, where they would cause one of the biggest upsets in the history of English football. After going behind to a Wayne Rooney penalty, they came back and won 2-1. To set up a quarter-final with France, which they lost 5-2. They're yet to qualify for any subsequent tournament. Despite reaching the semi-finals of 2 World Cups in the 70s and 80s, Poland wouldn't qualify for their first Euros until 2008, but have qualified for every edition since. Once in 2016, they got out of their group and then beat Switzerland on penalties on their way to a quarter-final showdown with Portugal. Lewandowski put them 1-0 up in the second minute, but they couldn't hold on to their lead and eventually lost 5-3 on penalties. 2012 saw Montenegro's first attempt to qualify for the Euros, where they managed to beat out Switzerland, Wales and Bulgaria to clinch the playoff spot in their group. Despite being drawn against the Czech Republic, the lowest ranked of the seeded teams, they couldn't score a single goal and fell to a 3-0 defeat over the 2 legs. At 70th in the FIFA rankings, they are the highest ranked European side never to play at the Euros, so we could well see them make their debut in 2028. It hasn't taken us that long to get to the lowest ranked side in the world, San Marino. They've played 86 games in European qualifying and have lost all but 1. A 0-0 draw at home with Estonia in 2016 left them sitting pretty on 1 point, 15 behind Slovenia in the playoff place. Kosovo would make their debut in European qualifying 4 years later, where thanks to their performance in the 18-19 Nations League, they went through to a playoff semi-final against North Macedonia, which they lost 2-1 in an empty pandemic time stadium. Since the breakup of Yugoslavia, Croatia have failed to qualify for the Euros on just 1 occasion. In their first appearance in England '96, they were beaten 2-1 by eventual winners Germany in the quarterfinals, but would reach the same stage in 2008, only to lose on penalties to Turkey after a 1-1 draw. In 2000, Norway fought off the likes of Slovenia and Greece to top their qualifying group and make their debut at the European Championships. They kicked off the tournament brilliantly with a 1-0 win over Spain, but their defeat to Yugoslavia meant they just missed out on going through to the quarterfinals on their head-to-head record. Belarus have never really mounted a serious qualification attempt since independence from the Soviet Union in the 90s, but during qualifying for this year's tournament, they did pick up 12 points in the group, leaving them just 5 short of qualifying. That's probably their best effort to date. One of the 2 sides to make their debut at Euro 2020 was Finland. After finishing 4 points clear of Greece in their qualifying group, they were drawn into Group B, where they beat Denmark 1-0 in their opening game in Copenhagen. Unfortunately, it didn't go too well for them in St. Petersburg, where they lost against both Russia and Belgium to finish 3rd, missing out on going through as one of the 4 best 3rd place teams on goal difference. 4 years earlier, it was Northern Ireland's turn to make their debut at the Euros. Despite losing to both Poland and Germany, a 2-0 win over Ukraine was just enough to see them get out of their group in 3rd to set up a round of 16 clash with fellow UK debutants Wales. An own goal in the 75th minute would end their one and only Euros appearance. All the way on the other side of the continent lies Azerbaijan, who have attempted to qualify 8 times without success. 2012 was probably the year of their best effort, where wins over Turkey and Kazakhstan helped them on the way to 7 points, way short of the 17 needed for the playoff spot. Ukraine have now qualified for 4 Euros in a row after their first in 2012 as hosts, but the only time they got past the group stage was in 2020. A 2-1 win over North Macedonia was just enough to see them through in 3rd, and they then beat Sweden by the same scoreline in the round of 16. Eventual runners-up England were too much for them though, as they lost 4-0 in Rome. This year will be Serbia's first appearance at the Euros under their current moniker, but back in the very first edition in 1960, they reached the final as Yugoslavia. Winning a 5-4 thriller against France in the semis put them through to a final against the Soviet Union, which they lost in extra time. 8 years later, they'd get another chance to lift the trophy where they took the host Italy to a replay in the final, only to lose 2-0. In 2016, Switzerland reached the knockout stages for the first time, but 4 years later, they went one better. Despite being shafted with a tough draw against world champions France, they came back from 3-1 down to draw and then capitalised on an Mbappe miss in the penalty shootout to go through. Next up, Spain. Once again, they came from behind to draw, but only scored 1 out of their 4 penalties in the shootout, which ended their tournament. This year, they'll be hoping to go one round further again. Kazakhstan were only 1 point off qualifying for the Asian Cup in 2000, but have of course since switched to UEFA. By far and away, their best qualifying campaign was the most recent, where they finished with a respectable 18 points, just 4 short of automatic qualification. But because of their performance in the Nations League, they went through to the playoffs, meaning they were only 2 games away from qualifying for their first major tournament. Conceding 5 goals without reply in Athens soon stops them dreaming though. After 16 countries, we finally arrived at our first winners. The Netherlands lost their opening game of the 1988 group stage to the Soviet Union, but beating both Ireland and England ensured their passage to the semi-finals. After coming from behind to beat host Germany, they once again had to face the Soviet Union in the final, but this time won 2-0 to lift their first and to date only major trophy. One of the notable absentees of this year's Euros is Sweden, who had qualified for the last 6 in a row. Their first appearance in 1992 as hosts was their best though, as they topped their group of Denmark, France and England, but narrowly lost 3-2 to a recently reunified Germany in the semis. Had the European Championships been around during Hungary's golden days, we could well have seen them win a few, but as we had to wait until the 60s, they only have 2 semi-finals under their belt. Their first was lost to eventual winners and host Spain in extra time, and the second 1-0 to the Soviet Union. Since then, it took them 44 years to play at the Euros again, but they have now qualified for the last 3 in a row. Since joining UEFA, Gibraltar have played in 3 qualifying campaigns and have lost every single one of the 26 games that they've played. They did manage to score 3 times in their 2020 campaign, including 2 against Georgia at home. As mentioned in the World Cup video, link in description, Scotland have played in 11 major tournaments but have never managed to get past the group stage in any of them. Their best of their 3 Euros appearances was probably 1996, where they just missed out on the knockout stage due to the Netherlands having scored 1 more goal. Belgium are yet to win a major tournament despite their being 3rd in the world rankings, but in 1980 they topped their group of Italy, England and Spain to go straight through to a final with former champions West Germany. After making it 1-1 in the 75th minute, they conceded just before the final whistle to deny them the European title. After the introduction of the Nations League and its integration with the playoffs, the first side to be given their Euros debut as a result was North Macedonia. Beating Georgia 1-0 in the playoff final put them through to Group C of the final tournament, where they lost to all 3 of the Netherlands, Austria and Ukraine and were sent home pointless. 2016 saw one of the best debuts of all time at any tournament, when Wales tops their group of England, Slovakia and Russia before edging past Northern Ireland in the round of 16. That set up a quarter-final against one of the pre-tournament favourites in Belgium. A mental trio of Ashley Williams, Hal Robson-Kanu and Sam Vokes all scored to give them a 3-1 victory. They couldn't get past eventual winners Portugal in the semis, but just reaching that round equalled the British record of the time achieved by England in 1996. Moldova are still yet to qualify for any major tournament since independence from the Soviet Union, but the closest they've come to qualifying for the Euros was probably for this year's edition. After losing their second game against Albania, they then went unbeaten to go into their last game knowing a win would see them qualifying, but they couldn't do much but watch as they fell to a 3-0 defeat to the Czech Republic. The fall of Yugoslavia was what allowed Denmark to qualify for Euro 1992, as finishing second in their qualifying group meant they were picked as Yugoslavia's replacement for the final tournament. After 2 games without scoring, they beat France 2-1 to finish with just enough points to go through to the semi-finals, where an 86th minute equaliser against reigning champions the Netherlands allowed them to win on penalties, setting up a final with the reigning world champions Germany. Their 2-0 win in that game will probably remain the pinnacle of Danish football for many generations to come. As Franco was still kicking about at the time of the first European Championship, Spain actually refused to travel to the Soviet Union in qualifying and withdrew from the tournament. 4 years later though, as hosts, they played the Russians in the final and lifted their first major trophy. They'd have to wait until the next century to win another title, where a golden generation of talent helps them win all 3 of Euro 2008, the 2010 World Cup and Euro 2012, beating Germany and Italy in the 2 European finals. Despite reaching a couple World Cup semis in the 20th century, Austria wouldn't actually qualify for the Euros until 2008 when they hosted the tournament. They have qualified on merit 3 times since, and in 2020 got out of their group to face Italy in the round of 16. At 90 minutes, neither team had scored, but the eventual champions won 2-1 in extra time. As mentioned in the World Cup video, I'll talk about Czechoslovakia separately before talking about its 2 successor nations. Before the breakup, Czechoslovakia played in 3 European Championships and reached the final once, winning on penalties against West Germany after a 2-2 draw. The Czech Republic, on the other hand, have played in every single Euros they've attempted to qualify for, which by my reckoning makes them the only country to have done so. They're yet to repeat the success of their first appearance though, when they reached the final of England '96, only to be knocked out by a German golden goal in extra time. There are only 7 European teams lower than Latvia in the world rankings, making them the lowest ranked side to ever qualify for the Euros. In 2004 qualifying, they beat off Poland and Hungary to finish second in their group, which set up a 2-legged playoff match with Turkey, who had just reached the semi-finals of the 2002 World Cup. After winning the home leg 1-0, they came from behind in Istanbul to draw 2-2, qualifying them for their first ever major tournament. Given there were still only 16 teams at the final tournament in those days, I think this will stand for a long time as the most remarkable Euros qualifying story. Once in Portugal, they didn't get off to a bad start, narrowly losing to the Czech Republic and holding Germany to a draw, but a 3-0 loss to the Netherlands on the final day ended their journey. Romania will be playing at their 6th Euros this year, but so far they've failed to get past the group stage in all but 1 of their appearances. In 2000, a draw with Germany and an 89th minute winner against England sent them through to the quarterfinals. Italy proved too much for them though, and they lost 2-0. Their neighbours to the south have only qualified for 2 European Championships, getting knocked out in the group stage in both. They did beat Romania and get a draw with Spain at England at '96, but that still left them 1 point short of the knockout stages. After their appearance at the inaugural tournament, France wouldn't actually qualify again until 1984, but they did make that appearance count, beating Spain 2-0 in the final. They'd beat Spain again in the quarterfinals of the Euro 2000 on their way to a final with Italy, which was decided by 117th minute Zinedine Zidane golden goal from the penalty spot. Currently, they're second favourites to win Euro 2024, so they may well lift their 3rd title this year. Since the breakup of the Soviet Union, the Caucasus have been starved of major tournament football for 32 years. But thanks to the Nations League, Georgia had just 2 games between them and an end to that drought. A fairly comfortable win over Luxembourg in the semis put them through to the same position they were in 4 years earlier against North Macedonia. This time, despite playing a tougher side in Greece, they held it at 0-0 for 120 minutes and won the penalty shootout 4-2. Georgia's qualification kept up the Euros record of having at least 1 debutant at every single tournament. If we're still around in 4 years' time, we'll see if the record can keep going for 2028. Along with Wales and Northern Ireland, Portugal are the only country to have never been knocked out in the group stages of the Euros. They've also reached the final twice. The first was as hosts in 2004, where they lost 1-0 to Greece. The second was after a remarkable journey in which they drew all 3 of their group games, then beat Croatia in extra time, Poland on penalties, Wales 2-0, and host France in the final in extra time. So to summarise, they only won 1 game in 90 minutes and still ended up lifting the trophy. Without question, the biggest team yet to lay their hands on the European trophy is England, and they only reached the final for the first time at the last edition. We topped our group of Croatia, Czech Republic and Scotland, and then defeated the Germans 2-0 to go through to the quarterfinals. In what ended up being our only game away from home, we easily beat Ukraine 4-0, and then a Harry Kane goal in extra time against Denmark set up a final with Italy at Wembley. But I'd rather not bring up traumatic memories, so let's just say we didn't win. This year though, we will. Not too far to the north lies the Faroe Islands, who unsurprisingly have never qualified for the Euros. They have picked up the odd win here and there though, and in 2016 somehow beat Greece both home and away to finish above them in qualifying, but they were still 10 points off the playoff place. Armenia, who currently just sneak into the top 100 in the FIFA rankings, are the 4th highest ranked team never to play at the Euros. In 2012, they did come incredibly close though. Going into the final day of qualifying, they travelled to Dublin and were only 1 point behind the Irish. A win would have put them 2 legs away from the final tournament. Unfortunately, despite Mkhitaryan getting on the score sheet, they couldn't claw their way back from 2-0 down. It took Slovakia until 2016 to qualify for their first Euros after the breakup of Czechoslovakia, where a 0-0 draw with England and a victory over Russia were enough to see them through to the knockout stages as one of the best ranked third place teams. That set up a tough round of 16 draw with Germany, which they lost 3-0. When it comes to the Euros, Russia is the definition of peaking early. They're the only team to have qualified for the first 4 editions of the European Championships and won the first in 1960 with a 2-1 win over Yugoslavia in extra time. They also played in 3 other finals before the breakup of the Soviet Union, meaning they're tied with Spain, France and Italy. Only Germany have played in more finals. They are of course currently banned from playing in any FIFA or UEFA competitions, and we'll see if that's been lifted come Euro 2028. A former Soviet state themselves, Lithuania first entered European qualifying for the 1996 edition, which also happens to be their best effort to date. A draw with Croatia and an away win over Ukraine saw them finish 3rd on 16 points, just 7 short of qualification. Albania will be playing at their second ever major tournament at the Euros this year, with their only other appearance coming in 2016. During a qualification game in Serbia, everything got a bit ugly. The game was abandoned before half-time at 0-0, and UEFA put the game down as a 3-0 win for Serbia, whilst also deducting them 3 points for crowd disturbances. The Court of Arbitration for Sport eventually overturned part of the ruling, giving the game as a 3-0 win for Albania, but the points deduction remained. That meant that Albania finished 2 points ahead of Denmark and qualified for the Euros for the first time in their history. In the final tournament, they won their final group game against Romania to end up 3rd with 3 points, but had an inferior goal difference to the other third place teams, so didn't go through to the knockout stages. Much like Albania, Slovenia will be playing at their second European Championships this summer, having only previously played at the 2000 edition. In Group C, they threw away a 3-0 lead against former compatriots Yugoslavia in the first game, lost to Spain, and then drew with Norway to end up bottom with 2 points. Cyprus only won 1 game in their first 7 qualification attempts, but have since seen some improvement. In 2000, for example, they beat Spain 3-2 in their opening game and picked up a few more wins to be going into the final game just 1 point behind Israel in the playoff spot. Unfortunately, they were beaten by Israel in Vienna to end their best attempt to date. Along with San Marino and Gibraltar, Liechtenstein are the only other European nation in the 200 plus club, so it's not that surprising that they've only not finished bottom of their qualifying group once in 2016. A win and a draw against Moldova helps them on the way to 5 points, 13 short of the playoff spot. There's one Estonian qualification campaign that stands out from the rest, and that came in 2012, where a remarkable run including wins over Serbia and Slovenia left them going into their final game against Northern Ireland, knowing that if they won and Serbia failed to win, they would end up in the playoff spot. 2 late goals from Konstantin Vasiljev secured the 3 points, and Serbia then lost away to Slovenia, meaning one 2-legged tie was all that separated Estonia from their first major tournament. They were drawn against the Republic of Ireland, but a 4-0 loss in the home leg meant all hope was pretty much lost before the game in Dublin. Given those were still the times of the 16-team Euro, it was bloody good going for a team like Estonia to be as close as they were. Andorra have played a grand total of 70 qualifying games for the Euros and have lost all but 4. To be fair to them, those 4 have all come in the last 2 campaigns, so we may be seeing some improvement. In 2020, they scraped a 1-0 win over Moldova, helping them on their way to a record points tally of 4. There's just one team in world football that has qualified for the World Cup whilst never having played at their Continental Cup, and that team is Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's not for lack of trying though, they've got to the playoffs in all 4 of their last attempts, but have failed to get past the semi-final in the most recent 2. 2012 saw them keep Portugal to a 0-0 draw in the home leg, but capitulate to a 6-2 defeat away, and it was much the same against Ireland 4 years later. Whilst they have played at the Asian Cup whilst they were an AFC member, Israel have never qualified for the Euros, so they joined Bosnia as one of the only 2 UEFA nations to qualify for the World Cup without having played at the Euros. On 3 separate occasions, they've reached the playoffs, the first coming at their second attempt in 2000 after just edging out Austria. Denmark then obliterated them 8-0 over the 2 legs, and their wait to qualify has continued to this day. After 6 never qualifieds in a row, we can lift the spirits a bit with the Republic of Ireland, who have 3 European Championships under their belt. In 2016, a dramatic Robbie Brady winner over Italy, who had reached the final 4 years earlier, allowed Ireland to go through as one of the best ranked third place teams. In the round of 16, they were to face host France, and another goal from Robbie Brady, a penalty this time, put them 1-0 up in Lyon. But 2 Griezmann goals in the second half would end their journey. Turkey had to wait until 1996 and the expansion to 16 teams to play at their first Euros. 12 years later, they came into the 2008 edition as the second lowest ranked side, where in their group, a last minute winner against Switzerland and 2 late goals to turn around a defeat against the Czech Republic put them through to the knockout stages. Another late goal in the 32nd minute of extra time took their game with Croatia to penalties, which they won 3-1. Then in the semis, a late equaliser against Germany looks like it might take the game all the way, but Germany did a Turkey on Turkey with a 90th minute Philipp Lahm winner. Speaking of the Germans, they've won the joint most titles along with Spain and have reached the most finals out of anyone. During a stretch of 3 finals in a row starting in 1972, they beat the Soviet Union and Czechoslovakia and only had to wait 16 years to lift their 3rd European title in 1996. They're yet to do the same this millennium, but as they're the hosts for 2024, they're currently 3rd favourites to add another trophy to their cabinet. Euro 2004 was kicked off by host Portugal playing Greece, the 2nd lowest ranked team at the tournament. The game didn't go as expected as Greece won 2-1. The 1-1 draw with Spain that followed meant that Greece only just scraped through to the knockout stages on goals scored, setting up a round of 16 match with reigning champions and pre-tournament favourites France. They shocked everyone again with a 1-0 win, followed by a golden goal to knock the Czech Republic out in the semi-finals. Then Euros history would be made as the opening match repeated itself in the final and Greece would once again defy expectations to win 1-0. More recently, they failed to qualify for the last 3 tournaments, but nothing can take the miracle of 2004 away from Greece. As hosts in 1968, Italy actually got through to the final because of a coin toss after a 0-0 draw with the Soviet Union. In those days, if the score was level after extra time, they literally just flipped a coin to decide who won. They then went up against Yugoslavia in the final, where UEFA had the courtesy of allowing the teams to replay the match after a draw, and Italy won the replay 2-0. 52 years later, they would lift the trophy again after beating England on penalties, which by my reckoning is the longest break between European titles out of anyone. After 51 countries, we finally come to the end with Luxembourg. By far and away, their best qualifying campaign was the one just gone, where they finished with a very respectable 17 points, just 5 behind Slovakia in 2nd. Not to worry though, because the Nations League came to the rescue and offered them a playoff spot, and they were drawn to play Georgia away, but conceded twice without reply. So there you go. Let me know your predictions for this year's Euros down below. I've gone with England beating Switzerland in the final. If you're feeling generous, you can support the channel by becoming a member or using the super thanks down below. But most importantly, enjoy the sun, enjoy the beer, and enjoy the football. Auf Wiedersehen.